I've been thinking a lot about foundations lately. A lot of our modern life relies on specializing. So you pick a particular job, you become an accountant or a programmer, you choose your hobbies, you decide you like skiing or painting. And all these decisions are based on things that are unique to you, your tastes, your interests, your personality. But there's a core in life that's relatively universal, things we all need to do simply because we're human beings. Consider exercise. Outside of a few medical exceptions, we all should be exercising at least a little bit. Exercising is good for keeping strong, of course, but it's also linked to improve cognition, it helps your mood, it improves your health, it lets you live longer. Exercise, in short, is a foundation. So, regardless of your career, your hobbies, or your personal interests, exercise is good for you. Reading is probably another foundation. The world is full of knowledge that would benefit each of us. Whether or not we're academics or whether we care about intellectual matters much at all, reading would be helpful. Basic systems for productivity is another foundation. Our brains didn't evolve to keep track of doctor's appointments and the work projects we have to do and to-do list items. Even if the exact details of your productivity system are going to be up for debate, pretty much everyone is better off if they have a calendar and a to-do list. Diet, sleep, relationships, self-reflection, personal finances, these are all good candidates for foundations. Everyone benefits from eating better, being well rested, or having self-awareness and good financial health. And so thinking about foundations, there's a few observations that we can make about them. First, our foundations cannot be outsourced. So focus on your strengths is a common mantra for self-improvement, but it really only applies when the weakness that you're avoiding can be delegated or just simply ignored. I can hire a car mechanic to repair my car, given that I'm not very good at repairing my car, but I can't hire someone to exercise for me. So this inability to outsource this work means that the quality of your life is bounded by your weakest foundation, not the strongest. So if you're in great physical shape, but you're terrible with money, your problems are going to be financial. If you have an excellent career, but you don't take care of yourself and you have terrible health, then most of your worries are going to end up centering around your body. Second, a solid foundation is not the default. So we didn't evolve to go to the gym to exercise. Our ancestral environment was sufficiently physically taxing that there was no need to push ourselves to run or lift weights or go on a climbing wall without a pressing reason. Modern life is more leisurely, we're sedentary, we don't actually have to move so much in order to make a living and obtain enough calories to eat, so that means by default we move too little. This mismatch between how we used to be and how we are now explains some of the other foundations. Our brains aren't equipped with a mental to-do list because life on the savannah didn't have appointments. Similarly, we overeat because food is now abundant and highly processed. We sleep poorly because of artificial lighting. You can stay up much later than the sun sets. There's poor financial decisions because concepts like compound interest are not part of our hardwired intuitions. Third, most of the difficulty of good foundations is behavioral, not intellectual. So we all know we need to eat well and exercise and get enough sleep and spend less than we earn. It's not that the foundations are mysterious, it's just that they're difficult to manage behaviorally in a busy life. Now, that being said, I don't want to underrate the intellectual aspects. So for instance, most popular investing books advocate for active strategies that are actually bad advice for most casual investors. And similarly, popular nutrition and fitness books are full of lots of fads and quirky strategies that don't actually have that much evidence behind them. So knowing the right thing to do does matter. But the search for exotic strategies and some of these weird tricks that, defy mainstream science, these things are compelling precisely because they allow us to distract ourselves from the more basic and, quite frankly, boring work of doing the things that we need to do day in and day out. Sticking to an exercise habit long term is challenging, so in some cases we sometimes try to overcomplicate the process of exercising well or try to find shortcuts to try to remove that difficulty and place it somewhere else. Fourth, foundations need to be thought of holistically rather than one at a time. So one side effect of this behavioral rather than an intellectual difficulty is that it's probably a mistake to think of each foundation as being entirely separate from each other. It's not actually that hard to get the recommended 150 minutes of moderate aerobic exercise per week if that's your entire focus in life. The challenge is that any particular foundation is rarely your sole focus. You have work tasks and vacations, and maybe you're studying for an exam, or you have sick kids at home, or there's other hobbies that you're interested in, or some Netflix show you want to watch. All of these things impede your ability to do all the other things you're supposed to. Having a solid foundation means finding a way to fit all the pieces together. So it's exercising and eating well and reading and sleeping enough and managing your money and having a productivity system and keeping up your friendships. The real difficulty here is not each individual piece on its own, but that there's all these ands that must exist simultaneously. And that is what makes it really hard to do. Fifth, getting good enough matters more than perfection. Now, in our careers, excellence really matters. Superstar programmers, doctors, or lawyers can have 10 times the impact of their less than stellar colleagues. Even in a less stratified career, being really good at what you do can make a big difference in the options that you have. Now, thankfully, foundations exhibit the opposite pattern. Going from not exercising at all to exercising at least a little bit gives a much steeper boost to your health than going from marathoner to ultramarathoner will. Investing in solid foundations is qualitatively different than becoming the best in your field. Diminishing returns means that you don't actually have to be the best at any of your foundations. You just need to get good enough in each of them that they're not a drag on the rest of your life. Sixth, most foundations are metastable. So intellectually, you only need to learn the basic strategies for living well once. Maybe you probably already know some of them. Unfortunately, in practice, foundations are not something that we just set and forget. Most good habits are metastable, meaning that they can persist for a long time, but they're intrinsically more effortful than their inferior bad habit alternatives. So this means that it's easy for our foundations to start to crack. A short break from exercising becomes a year without setting foot in the gym. We get momentarily overwhelmed from work and stop being so disciplined with keeping up our productivity system, and then we realize that our work is a mess. Or we realize, you know what, I actually haven't read a new book in several months. Working on foundations should not be continuous, so if you build them properly, they should last longer. But even strong foundations require refreshing, and this is part of life, that we need to revisit these things again and again in order to make sure that they're not deteriorating. And this is especially true as your life grows and changes. As you move to different phases of your life, the habits and practices that served your foundation in your early 20s, for instance, are maybe going to be different when you're in your 50s or in your 70s. All of these considerations have me thinking about embarking on a new year-long project to work through and solidify some of my own foundations. Now, I have some personal experience with this kind of project. One of the very early successes of my writing career was a series I wrote called Habitual Mastery. And this series shared some of the insights that I had gained from undertaking dozens of new habits and experiments over a period of a couple years where I made a lot of efforts to improve myself. Now, when I undertook that effort nearly 20 years ago, my motivation in building a solid foundation was its value in helping me achieve larger ambitions, starting a business, graduating from college, doing big projects. It's difficult to do hard things in life when basic problems keep tripping you up. But today I'm motivated to revisit these foundations for quite a different reason. Reflecting on my life, I'm quite happy with how things have turned out. I have a successful business, I have a nice family, and plenty of interesting life experiences. So it's from this perspective, the mundane things in my life actually are the real determinant of my overall experience, rather than a desire to achieve something even bigger. Now, I suspect I'm not alone. So maybe you're like me now, you're happy with your overall position in life, but you want to make it better all around. Or perhaps you're more like I used to be, so you're eager to take on bigger or better challenges and recognize that solid foundations are going to be necessary to reach those higher heights. Now, in the past, when I've done year-long projects, I've tended to do them by myself. So the MIT Challenge and the Year Without English, these were personally motivated projects. I did not expect other people to do them along with me. But this project is obviously a bit different. Foundations are supposed to be universal, so it seems like a project that other people could benefit from. So in addition to sharing ideas from the project on this channel, I'm also going to try to offer it as a course, working directly with a group of people who are also keen to solidify the foundations in their life. 1 year is 12 months. So if you spend a month focusing on building each foundation, plus doing maintenance the rest of the year to ensure it's stable, there's enough time to focus on 12 different foundations. Now, it wouldn't be mandatory for anyone who's joining me on this project, but I'm also thinking of taking each month as a chance to do a mini intensive learning project about each foundational topic. While I do think that the difficulty is mostly behavioral, not intellectual, understanding how these foundations work and what the central recommendations are from people who are experts in the field is something that I definitely want to refresh my understanding of for each of these foundations when discussing them in the course. Additionally, I find that reading has a motivational as well as an informational effect. So if you read about personal finance or nutrition or fitness, it's not just the information that's giving you a chance to rethink your behavior, but it's also a source of information that's guiding your attention. So you're paying more attention to what you're actually doing, which can be very helpful when you're trying to work out new habits for your life. So with this project in mind, here's my plan for the year. The 12 foundations I want to cover, as well as the keystone habits that I think will support each of them. Number 1, fitness. Fitness is a paradigmatic example of a foundation. So not everyone needs to be an Olympian, but we all benefit from being in shape. And being in shape comes with an enormous list of benefits to health, mood, cognition, and so on. But being in shape is also something you can't bank through some intensive project and then just not worry about later. You need to maintain good habits and attitudes to ensure you're getting enough physical activity by default, even when you're not trying to get in shape. So here I think the keystone habit is going to be daily exercise for 30 minutes. Number 2, productivity. I had a recent conversation with my friend Cal Newport, and he brought up the importance of being seen as a reliable, productive person. So not someone who just works furiously to complete tasks, but simply being someone who doesn't drop the ball. If you tell them to do something, then they write it down somewhere and they actually get it done. Productivity and the reputation that goes with it is a foundation that allows you, somewhat paradoxically, to actually push back against a culture of burnout and overwork. So if everyone knows that you're organized with your time and your to-do list and you tell them, you don't have space for more work, they'll actually believe you. If they think that you're scattered or lazy or something like that, then they might just assume, well, you know what, I can just squeeze you a little bit harder and get more work from you. If you have your act together, you'll be much more able to work in ways that make sense for you. Here, the keystone habit would be to build a full capture productivity system so that no task, appointment, project, or idea is forgotten or misplaced. Number 3, money. Not everyone will be rich, but everyone should feel good about their finances. Like other foundations, the core of personal finance is relatively simple. Spend less than you earn, save and invest adequately for emergencies and retirement, and avoid consumer debt, and spend money on the things that matter to you and not what social scripts say that you should. Here, the keystone habit would be to just track your spending, know where your money is going. Number 4, food. So after fitness, healthy eating is probably the best investment you can make in your body. Yet eating right is really challenging. So for starters, our brains evolved to overconsume. We live in an environment with an abundance of calories, but our instincts are geared towards the threat of future starvation. Second, nutritional advice, especially what exists online, is super confusing. So should you eat low fat or low carb? Is butter good for you? Eggs? So despite the seeming flip-flopping of nutritional science, the core of healthy eating is fairly obvious. We just don't do it all the time. So my idea for the keystone habit for this month would be to go a month without eating junk food and then set clear personal guidelines after. Obviously, we don't want to live a overly restrictive life with your diet, but I think sometimes we mindlessly fall into eating things that we know aren't good for us just because we're running on autopilot. So this is a chance to reset that and do it mindfully. Number 5, reading. Now, a few practices are as important for bringing high quality ideas into your life as reading more books. This is actually a foundation that I remember when I was doing research for my last book that it's weakened quite a bit for the average American. The number of books that we read has declined quite a bit since, surprise, surprise, the invention of smartphones and social media. Now, while blogs and courses and YouTube videos like this one can teach you things, I do think there's something special about books. To write a book, an author has to spend at least a few years thinking deeply about a topic. And reading a good book gives you a concentrated output of years of thinking from presumably a smart person on a topic that they've spent a lot of time thinking about. The same probably cannot be said for the average Instagram story. Sorry. Now, we all know we should read more, but we don't always have the foundation in place for doing so. So the keystone habit for this one is going to be setting aside 10 minutes before bed for reading an actual book. Number 6, outreach. The quality of our life depends on the quality of our relationships. You can have the perfect body and tons of money, but you'll be miserable if the human connections in your life are lacking or absent. Now, I tend to think of relationships as having two separate foundations, outreach and connection. Outreach is about meeting new people and reconnecting with people you already know, but they're on the periphery of your social network. This is a broadening of your social network to give you a chance to make new friends, get to know colleagues, or find romantic partners. And then connection, obviously, is about deepening the intimacy with the people that you are already close with. Now, here, I think the keystone habit would be once per week, engage in an activity that allows you to meet new people. This would be something that you would do for fun. It could be something you do for work, but it is a way to bring new people into your life. Number 7, sleep. So sleep would fill out the trifecta of health-oriented foundations following fitness and diet. And while it's seemingly the simplest of the three, it's tricky to get it right. As a parent who has 2 small kids, I can attest to the difficulty and the importance of getting adequate sleep, particularly in the newborn phase when waking up multiple times a night is just part of the package. But sleep is more than just being unconscious. The rhythms for your falling asleep and waking up define your day. They determine when you're going to have energy and what kinds of activities you're going to be able to excel at. So there's a reason that there's an entire genre of books devoted to the topic of waking up early, because changing your sleep rhythms can be transformative for the rest of your life. The keystone habit I'm thinking here is going to be sticking to a consistent sleep and wake time, even on weekends. Number 8, reflection. So if regular reading shapes the flow of information into your head, then regular writing shapes the ideas that are already there. So this is journaling, whether you're documenting events or you're planning for the future or just troubleshooting life's many problems, is a foundation for more thoughtful and deliberate decisions. Reflection is a foundation that for many of us ends up in disrepair because of the urgency of many of the typical tasks we face. So we're so busy that we don't have time to sit down and actually really think about what are our goals, what are the problems we're facing, what are our motivations. But it's this frenetic pace that encourages us to be impulsive in our decision making rather than thoughtful. It can exacerbate the frazzled busyness that made us forgo contemplation in the first place. So here the keystone habits would be to write for 10 minutes a day. Number 9, connection. I'll never forget the advice an older friend gave me upon hearing that I was about to become a father. He said, don't listen to people who say that they spend quality time with their kids. When it comes to your kids, quantity time is quality time. The key relationships in our life with our family, our partners, our kids, our best friends are obviously important. And often we fail to shore up this foundation regularly. We chase off far-off ambitions while neglecting the nearby relationships that actually underpin our happiness at the end of our lives. Phones and digital distractions have made this worse because we can now be physically in the same room with someone, yet utterly disconnected. So I believe that a keystone habit here is having one genuine conversation with a close friend or spouse per day, preferably with your phone off. Number 10, focus. So the first foundation of productivity is being organized with your tasks. So being the kind of person who doesn't forget things, you get stuff done, you don't drop the ball. But the second foundation of productivity is getting the right things done. Deep work, a term coined by my friend and frequent collaborator Cal Newport, is a good proxy for the sustained concentration we need to do work that actually matters. Now, not all work is deep, but the deep work is usually what gets undersupplied in our daily working rhythms. So here I think a good keystone habit is carving out a regular set of time for your daily deep work. Number 11, organization. Organizing our tasks is clearly central to productivity. If we keep misplacing our to-do lists and our calendar appointments, we're not going to be very effective in our working lives. But a parallel exists in our physical environment. If our physical space is cluttered, disorganized, we're going to have a hard time making use of our stuff. Getting organized, however, is daunting because there's this large fixed cost to decluttering things, which can mean that we prefer to live in the mess rather than to actually fix it. Poor organizational systems in turn tend to revert to chaos relatively quickly if they don't actually serve the functions of our lives. So here for the keystone habit, I'm thinking that initially it would be focused on reorganizing one small space per day. So that could be a drawer, it could be a shelf, even a computer folder on your desktop. After this initial period of getting organized, the goal would be that everything you own has a home so that the organizational system is sustainable as you bring in new things or get rid of old ones. Number 12, service. So, all of the foundations that I've been talking about so far are actually pretty self centered. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. Having your life together is probably the most important precursor to living altruistically. Neglecting foundations tends to make you less able to help others and more dependent on others for their help. But I think a purely self centered approach at securing foundations is actually somewhat self defeating. Ultimately, we're not living just to maximize our own self interest. We're working to make life better for the people around us. And so service is the foundation for a meaningful life. Here, I think the keystone habit is volunteering at least once per week. All right, so this list of 12 is not complete. There's probably dozens more things that I could have plausibly put onto the list. Creative self-expression, time in nature, mindfulness. Heck, even dental hygiene is underrated since the failure to floss actually increases your risk of heart attacks. Perhaps the biggest omission from this list is some kind of explicit devotion to a religious or spiritual practice. And when I first discussed this list as an essay on my newsletter, this was the biggest piece of feedback I got, that I'm missing that. However, I do think spiritual practices are pretty diverse and they're kind of hard to universalize across people of different faiths and belief systems. Still, I think many of the foundations that I did list can be put in a more spiritual direction, particularly if that's something you want to do. So reading, you can aim that at reading religious texts, and reflection can turn into prayer or meditation. And service, obviously, is a component of most world religions. Similarly, other important aspects of life, such as trying new things or being creative, they're manifold in the ways they integrate into our lives. So while they certainly matter, they're less supported by universal concrete behaviors that apply to everyone. All of these foundations, put side by side, look like a lot, but the total daily and weekly commitment isn't nearly so grand, and that's by design. So the long run effort required to sustain all 12 of these foundations should be on the order of 1 hour per day, and many of the foundations shouldn't require extra daily time because presumably it's a change in how you're already doing something rather than an additional thing to add to your daily to-do list. The short-term effort of getting set up is higher though, but this is also why focusing on each foundation for a month makes sense. It can take some time to get in a position where lightweight habits can actually sustain you for years into the future. So setting up a good personal finance system, for instance, can actually take some research and effort at first, but after it's done, it shouldn't require more than a brief monthly check-in. So as I mentioned, this is not just a project that I'm undertaking for my own interest, but I'm also going to be offering as a course to bring other people through it together. So if you're interested in joining me for the year ahead, in the description below, we're going to offer some details where you can either sign up if we're ready to accept new registrations, or you can join the waiting list in case we're not at this moment. Now, I'm hoping to share some updates through the coming year of what I'm doing and learning, and as well as drawing some of the lessons from the experience of other people who are working with me in the course, even if you don't plan on joining the course. So I'm interested to know what you think. Which foundations in your life do you think need work, and which ones are already pretty strong? Share your thoughts in the comments, and it will be interesting to have some discussions about what we all think we need to work on to get better at our foundations.